Today, very honoured to introduce Rob St John, who's a freelance artist from this area, from around and about. Went away, come back again, and he's working predominantly in East Lancashire and with the people and the geographies of East Lancashire with sound. So I'll hand over to Rob.
Thanks folks, nice to see you all today, thanks for coming. Real pleasure to be here. As Paul said, kind of grew up not far away, like Sabden and Padiham, edge of Burnley. And for the last kind of 15 or more years, I've somehow made a do of it as an artist. And Paul's asked me here today partly to talk to you about those kind of practicalities of, in an increasingly kind of squeezed and tricky world, kind of keeping that creative flame afloat. And I guess a lot of you are on different courses and at different stages, so I've kind of tried to keep things quite broad today. But essentially behind it is this idea of, if you want to be an artist, if you want to work in the creative arts, you absolutely can. There's ways to do it. The underlying thing underneath all of it is just to keep going. So this talk is going to be in 3 parts over the next hour or so. First third, I'm going to talk about recent project which has only just finished. It's been going over the last year or so. It's called Are You Lost? It's been working with people all around fringes of the Forest of Bowland, that big area of hills just to the north and the east of here. I'm working with people in towns and cities, in Burnley, in Blackburn, Lancaster, Preston, who maybe can see the hills but perhaps can't get to them for whatever reason or another. Second part of the talk, I'm going to talk to you about 3 questions that I'm really mulling over in my work as an artist just now. Things that I'm not quite sure about, maybe things that you'd have an opinion or be able to help me with. Appreciate your perspective. And then we'll end with 5 things to think about if I was starting again for the first time. 5 things I think about starting a career as an artist. So this is the Forest of Bowland. This is a map of where I've been doing Project Are You Lost over the last year or so. We're just off this map, we're down here somewhere in Blackburn. You sort of see Clitheroe and then Burnley's here. And then there's this big area of hills and rivers and reservoirs. Has anybody been to the Forest of Bowland? Oh, yeah. I've seen a few nods. That's better. Weekly? Where do you go there? Start. Bowland Knots, what a classic. Bowland Knots is where my little girl calls Gemstone Mountain. King's Rock. Okay, that's like up here-ish somewhere. Yeah, there we are, Bowland Knots. It's an amazing big kind of outcrop of millstone grit up on the top of the fell. It's full of all this quartz. It sort of glimmers in the sunshine. It's absolutely beautiful. Forest of Bowland's amazing because it's this area of, like, you could call it wilderness, you know, but it's so close to all these kind of major towns and cities. And I think it's something like there's 1 million people live within half an hour's drive of Bowland, but often, I mean, maybe this class is a bit of an anomaly, but often people haven't heard of it for one, and if they have, you know, public transport's crap. There's not that many places to kind of park and easy to get to, so it can feel a little bit like an island in the middle of Lancashire. So what I wanted to do in Are You Lost was think about how people on fringes, as I say, can maybe see the hills like you can from Blackburn in some ways, can maybe get into this landscape more, and then actually what happens when you bring new people to a landscape. What sort of questions happen? What sort of ideas bubble up? What sort of kind of creative art might we think about those relationships with nature fostering? This is side of Pendle Hill. A lot of you might know. It's kind of like open field barn sort of landscape. There's my partner and my daughter trying to escape me on top of Clough Pike near Lancaster, probably when I was banging on about some form of art in the Forest of Bowland. And one of the reasons for Bowland feeling like a bit of an island in the middle of Lancaster is because of its histories of land ownership. So up until about 20 years ago, when there was this piece of legislation called the Countryside Rights of Way Act, lots of Bowland was owned by private companies, private individuals, often incredibly rich individuals. The Duke of Westminster, who's worth something like £7 billion. And they were kind of quite protectionist on saying, actually, this land's for us, this is for us to enjoy, it's for grouse shooting, and it's not for people to come walk all over and despoil. So all through the 20th century, there was this amazing history. A lot of it came from towns like Blackburn and Burnley and Nelson, of real kind of radical politics and a kind of sense of saying, actually, you know what, this landscape's for everybody. And so people like the Ramblers Association and the Clarion clubs and things like that all kind of really lobbied for access for people from the town and from the city to be able to get out into Bowland, into nature. And over the last 20 years ago, also, it's been easier. And this is Colne in East Lancs, and so as you can see, it's kind of that classic East Lancs view of, you know, being in the terrace streets and being able to see the fell. So I got commissioned about a year ago to do this project called Are You Lost? It was a commission partly from the Arts Council, but partly from the National Landscapes Association, who used to be called the Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty, and they look after places like the Forest of Bowland. And they were interested in getting an artist in for a year to actually sort of say, right, what happens if you go and work with communities around the fringes of this area that we see as like important for biodiversity, for, you know, locking up carbon for climate change, for locking up water in the peat bogs to stop flooding. What happens when you bring people who might not be able to come out into that landscape, out into it? What new ideas do we foster? And are you lost? I suppose it's that question no one wants to be asked when they're exploring a landscape for the first time. Oh, bloody hell, farmers here, are you lost? But what I wanted to do in this project was think, by the end of it, all these communities I worked with, and ended up over the last year, worked with about 2,000 people in person. And we've had about 17,000 people engage with the project more widely, come to exhibitions, see various things that we've done. I wanted the answer to that question, are you lost, to be like, no, you know what, I belong here. These hills are just as much mine as anybody else's. So there's the big question that I had at the start of this project, and I think, you know, thinking about how we approach big projects, whether it's something you're doing within college or as part of your degree, or whether it's a kind of commissions that you might take on after you graduate, it's good to have these sort of big organising questions of actually, what's the thing I'm trying to do with this? Actually, you know, apart from making the work and the thing that I enjoy as a creative artist, what work is this thing going to do in the world? And in Are You Lost? I really wanted to think about how can participatory art, a lot of you might have talked about this, socially engaged art, essentially where you work with people throughout the entire project. You create spaces to listen and to collaborate and to engage. And crucially, you take on board the things that people offer to you, their perspectives, their ideas, their fears, their hopes, their memories. You take those on board, whether that's as word or as sound or as film or as drawing, whatever it is. And somehow that all creates an archive that you funnel into the thing you make at the end. And I guess in my work, participatory art or socially engaged art, I find it incredibly inspiring. I find it incredibly nourishing as an artist, getting to work with communities around here that essentially where I'm from. I think it also allows you to talk about big issues around here, about cost of living crisis, about lack of opportunities for young people, about, you know, the way that things like the ecological crisis and the climate emergency have been felt in our daily lives. It allows you to sort of like create spaces for listening to things that are going on right now. But also crucially and pragmatically, and I know this is an element of Paul's work as well, in sort of making your work kind of sustainable as an artist, it's also where there are pots of money these days to kind of continue work, to be able to pay the bills. You know, so socially engaged art, I would say, is one thing to take away from this talk. You can actually do really good work in the world, you can be really creatively nourished, and you pay the bills from it. So here's some of my young'uns. This is a group from Nelson, this is from Marsden Heights High School. In Are You Lost, I sort of started this programme of, like I say, trying to create this creative archive by listening to people. And I took tons of people out into Bowland and we did stuff like this. We made kind of forest school kind of sculptures and huts and buildings, and all the time we were talking about relationships with nature and how that kind of differs with, you know, maybe where your family's from or the experiences you've had or the kind of, the community around you growing up. All of this, all the time, I was kind of taking notes and doing exercises where we draw or we sound record or we make films. And that led to things like these same kids from Marsden Heights having an exhibition of their work at Prism Contemporary earlier this year. Also took, this is a group from Yes Hub in Nelson, took people from the edges of Bowland out to meet people who live and work in the hills. This is a farmer, Philip Marginson, who has a sheep and dairy farm on the edge of Pendle Hill. And these young'uns did quite a long form project with me where they were making podcasts for weeks and weeks. And again, it's that sort of socially engaged art, finding strategies that document the world around you from different people's perspectives, but also create the space for creativity. So in the podcast workshops, we weren't only kind of telling stories about East Lancashire and its relationship to the Forest of Bowland, but we were also experimenting with experimental sound recording ideas, some of which I'll come on to again. And what that meant is we created a whole kind of library of podcasts of almost showing our work in like an open portfolio of how this project happened, how it came into being. And I really like doing that. I really kind of encourage you to do that in any of your work, to kind of show that process and how you get somewhere. The process is almost always just as interesting as the product itself, especially when you're bringing people's voices into it. Here's some more amendments this is from Lomershire Primary School in Nelson. Took them out to do choir singing in Clarion House on the side of Pendle Hill. And this was fascinating because this was a predominantly Muslim class, and they were singing nasheeds and these kind of like devotional songs, like many of which had kind of relationships to nature and mountains and the kind of peace and serenity that brought for them. We were singing it out in Pendle, and I was teaching them kind of these kind of more like radical politics, folk and walking songs that come from here. And again, it was finding that space to sort of listen to each other, to interact, to find moments of overlap, moments of difference, and to document all that. So all the time, all this stuff was just being squirreled away by me into this archive, thinking, right, got to make an installation at the end of the summer. How do I kind of funnel all this learning into the thing? And it wasn't just learning from kind of young people, it was learning from people who live and work and know Bowland like inside out. So that's one of the earliest maps of the area. It's from like the 1400s. I love how all these hills just look like little tiny top hats. Definitely not to scale or particularly accurate, but kind of beautiful as a piece of visual art in a way. This is the Fairy Hole Caves in the middle of Bowland. This is a ritual cave right in the middle that got used as a kind of a burial site, where it was seen as like this is where your body would kind of ascend from life and to death into looking out over kind of down towards here from the hills towards Preston and Blackburn. And I went out with some archaeologists and learnt about all that. So all the time as I was learning from young people on the edges of Bowland, I was learning from these kind of experts who live and work in Bowland. At the same time, squirreling all this work away. Here we are doing more podcast stuff. Sound recording became really important to this whole thing. It's got this twinned role again. Documents a place, gives us freedom to express our creativity. And this was a day we had with some of the young people, taking them out into the middle of Bowland to be filmed by Countryfile, incredibly. This was quite a wild and unexpected sort of day. where we ended up with some of them who had kind of come to the project with various kind of tricky situations in their lives. And for me, after working with them for a few months, seeing them kind of have the confidence and the articulation to be able to talk on national telly was just it felt really, really great. Sometimes I like trying to have chats with non-human people less chatty, less conversational. But as well as all this work with people, I suppose my practice as an artist over the last kind of 10-15 years has been very much about installations. It's been about taking spaces, whether that's in a gallery or in a museum, or whether it's in a space that you might not traditionally think about using for art. And it's using sound, film, and sculpture, and text to kind of create an environment within that space, to transform a space just temporarily while people walk into it, listen, look, maybe try and conjure some form of experience from that. So all the time in Are You Lost, whilst I was working with people, I was also making my own recordings throughout Poland. And I wasn't just using this sort of like traditional, they call it a dead cat, the stereo microphone that you can use to record cows or birds or whatever you want, voices. I was also using a kind of toolkit of more experimental microphones. I'm going to play some recordings from them now for you. Just give me a sec to turn this on. So these are binaural microphones. These look like really cheap earbuds that you might kind of buy for a few quid, but actually they're microphones. They sit in your ears and they record an entire 360 sound world around your head. Does anybody know what this bird is? Kelly, absolutely. This is up on the top of the fell in Poland. These sit in your ear. You have these ridiculous looking BFG-like windshields to stop the wind getting in and altering your recording. But if you're looking to get into sound recording, like Paul's a brilliant person to talk to about it, I absolutely love binaural microphones. Really cheap as chips, really like low kind of tech. You don't have to carry loads of stuff with you. And you can kind of just walk with them in, plug them into a phone, plug them into a cheap little film recorder, and you can make really, really high quality recordings with them. When you listen back on headphones, they're really, if any of you are interested in kind of doing, film production or video game production, as well as like installation work or music, you can get really interesting effects about kind of spatial sound. You can make sound come from over here or over there. You can make it move. You can make it move around a listener's head. They give you a lot of like flexibility to make these kind of sound worlds. This is the second type of microphone I used a lot in Are You Lost. These are called hydrophones, and these were originally, let me just put that very loud insect back on. These were originally developed by the American military in about the 1940s with the idea of being able to drop underwater microphones in off warships and be able to listen out for enemy boats. It sort of worked, it sort of didn't. Inadvertently, they made the first underwater recordings of whales and dolphins in the middle of the ocean. So hydrophones have got this kind of military history, but they're now used by lots and lots of experimental artists to try and record unheard, unseen sound worlds in little puddles like this. It's an underwater insect. You know the way that like grasshoppers and crickets rub their back legs together when they communicate? They stridulate, and you hear that kind of like that buzzing. You hear it all the way across the hills. Underwater insects do exactly the same thing. They rub their back legs together to communicate with each other. So what you're hearing is a water boatman.
Like the ones that go across the top.
Exactly, yeah. So there's a couple of really interesting things to point out from what you guys were just saying. One is hydrophones give you this window into a world that you might not notice otherwise, right? you can just look at this puddle and think, nah, nothing going on there. You can do it in canals, right? Covered in oil slicks and shopping trolleys. You drop them in and there's this whole kind of life world going on beneath the surface in everyday life. It's also, like you were saying about it sounding like an alien, it also tells us something about the way that when we listen to sound out of context, we can put all of these ideas and these perceptions onto something, right? And so that, when you're thinking about composing, when you're thinking about recording this sort of sound and then reusing it in something else, there's a whole kind of school of sound production called Foley sound, where you're doing exactly this. You're taking a sound like, I don't know, chopping a cucumber in half and then using it as ripping a zombie's head off, right, in a film. You can think about it in a similar way with this sort of recording. You record some sort of unusual, off-limit sound, and the world's your oyster in terms of how you then play it back into the world. Find another recording. So I also use geophones a lot. And geophones... Anybody know what we might be listening to here?
Ice. Standing on ice.
Yeah, very watery. We're listening to ice here. This is some recordings I made on a residency I did in the Baltic Sea on a frozen island in the middle of winter about 10 years ago. And geophones are microphones that are essentially adapted from the technologies that geologists would use to be able to sense earthquakes or volcanic eruptions, essentially to be able to sense incredibly. Exactly. Yeah. But what it's doing is it's converting it into sound information, into sound waves that we can then hear. So these are really, really cool microphones. Again, they're not crazy expensive in sound world. You can get one for maybe 150 quid. This is another recording I made with geophones. Flowing water in there. What are we listening through? Yeah, we're listening through a cave, exactly. So this is in an underground cave, listening to invisible water flows. This is up in the Yorkshire Dales. But it sort of asks another question there about what we actually listen to when we hear a recording. In this recording, we're not only hearing the thing that's making the sound, the water, but we're also hearing the characteristics of the environment that it's in. We're hearing sound through rock. We're hearing it echo around the cave. Sound recordings come with information about where they were made, right? And again, that tells you something about that place, but it also gives you loads of possibilities as a composer or as an artist, whatever you want to do with sound, to mess with that, to make one place sound with another place, to put music on top of this, to make music from this. Think of it as a starting point. So these are contact mics. This is another form of recording I use a lot. They're essentially really cheap and cheerful. If any of you are good with soldering and with building stuff yourself, you can make a contact mic for like a few quid. And again, these are sensing vibrations in the world and turning it into sound information. This is a contact mic clipped to a rusting boat hull on Morecambe Bay. And again, it's all about, just like with recording in water, just like with recording in rock, you're recording through materials to hear the world in new ways, to get these sort of interesting senses of an unheard and unseen kind of world, and a whole bunch of sounds that you might not be able to record in any other way. Paul was telling me earlier about recording, what was it, an interview with contact mics through a painting?
Yeah.
So in Are You Lost, I was doing all this. I was recording not only with people, bringing them out into the hills, but I was also doing all this kind of weird and wonderful experimental kind of sound recording to try and listen to a kind of unheard, unseen Boland, I suppose. I was also making films the whole time. Here's one of my groups of some lads in Bentham on the northeast of Boland, and they were making these pinhole lenses out of material that we found on the fell. So you can see there's like lichen, sheep's wool, seed pods, feathers, all sorts of stuff that we foraged. And what I did with these, because I couldn't bring these lads out into the hills, I used the lenses that they made for me as the things to shoot through when I was making the films for the installation. So I'm at the Great Stone of Four Stones. Have you been there? Yeah. I've got my Boland experts here. This is an unusual treat. So I was using these to shoot through for all the installation. The idea was, again, it goes back to this idea of socially engaged art, bringing other people's ways of seeing the world into the work that you make as an artist. If I couldn't take these people out into the fells, at least I could look through their eyes in a way of manner of speaking by shooting through their lenses. And what that left, I'll show you in a minute, but it left these sort of really interesting, abstract, soft, kind of textural washes of colour from a landscape. And the places that I shot these films in all around Boland were mapped by people as well. So I asked people to map places that had kind of significance for them, that like had a moment of memory or something that was important. And we made these huge maps in kind of workshops. And I suppose this is a thing, if you're making socially engaged art, sometimes the idea of being an artist might not feel that much like being an artist, if that makes sense. You gather people in village halls or in pubs or in back rooms, and you peer around maps and you map things, and you kind of, there's a whole world of art theory, which I'm not going to go into, called relational aesthetics, that some of you might have come across before. And if you're interested in this stuff, it's worth finding out some really cool reading around it. But the idea of relational aesthetics says that like any situation where you're sort of bringing people together, where you're doing things together, where you're listening, where you're collaborating, can be understood as art. So I kind of take that as a bit of a guiding principle, really. So all this time I was mapping these places that were important. This was a little temporary sculpture I made, a little cairn in the gallery and campus at Lancaster, where people could listen into some of these recordings we've just heard, and then speak into the gramophone and lend their voice to, again, just say what's important about this place, what connects me to this place, what holds me back from connecting more. All the time this is growing and growing as a way of kind of sensing, as a way of mapping creatively both. So all this work had three big ideas behind it. And again, going back to that idea of saying, right, whenever you do any big project, keep yourself sort of on track by constantly going back to what is it you're actually trying to do. And for me, there were three themes that emerged. And one was like trying to keep open these spaces for sharing new and diverse voices about perceptions of nature, access to the landscape, and really kind of crucially, how it might flourish in the future, aspirations for its future. The second one that I was trying to do all the way through, working with all these people, was like trying to listen to people but also offer something back, right? It's not just a one-way street. It's saying, right, I can provide you with long-term training, skilling, mentoring that helps you kind of document and tell stories about place in everyday life. So we did all sorts of kind of podcast making, writing, filmmaking. It's not only me, it's like extractive artist. This is a model that lots of people are trying to get past, saying I go to a place, or I go to a community, I get the thing I want out of this, my exhibition at the end, and then I leave. I think the way we need to think as artists, socially engaged artists, is it's like actually it's a two-way negotiation. You're listening and you're learning, but you're also giving back and you're leaving a kind of situation, a community in a better state, even slightly, than you found it. And so all this, at the end of it, I still had to make an installation. So all this work kind of went towards kind of what we might call co-creation. Anybody come across that word before? It's basically everything I've been talking about here. It's not just me as artists, like imposing my will and my view on this kind of landscape on this community, but actually saying, let's all do it together. I'll channel it, I'll kind of mould it, and I'll create the spaces for it to bubble up. And this is what we did this summer. We made Are You Lost, and we took it all around the Forest of Bowland. We got spaces in abandoned barns, in dusty kind of haylofts, in derelict buildings in the middle of Nelson, used a solar generator and brought film and sound and textiles that we made from all these sessions, and we presented them. And part of the idea was of saying, right, art doesn't usually happen in these spaces. Wouldn't it be cool if it did, if it said something about the place, and if people coming to see it could have a bit of an adventure coming to find it. So as I say, we've had about 2,000 people who've kind of lent their voice to making this work, and we've had about 17,000 people come and see it and engage with it in one way or another. Here's a barn in the middle of a field where we ran it on a solar powered generator in the summer in Dunsart Bridge. Had some of the films which I'm just about to show you playing. We had kind of textiles. It's essentially what I said before about installations, about taking a space and creating them into something else where new experiences, new ideas might bubble up. So I'm going to show you the installation film now.
Are you lost? Where to begin? It's Bowland, not Poland for a start. With a B. A bow in the land, the curve of the horizon. The landscape behind a curtain. The absence, the echo, the hum. The hills are a beacon and a barrier. Time, family, religion and safety all estrange them. Transport, planning, weather too. The gloom of the witching hour, darkness within darkness. And we're toeing the same trods as those connectors and visionaries and trespassers who've gone before, all waymarkers in opening this place up. It's an echo of an old song, you know, the need for freedom, peace and the open path. Somewhere away from the tight streets and smoke, the space for ideas to circulate, for group listening, meeting places and gathering spaces. The first step ripples out across lifetimes. Bowland had nothing to mine, only farm. It became an island of old ways, but its wealth has always circulated far further. The felt hats from its remote valleys clothed enslaved people. The spoils of empire gilded its gates. The commons were colonised. Society settled. The woodland shrunk. And it turns out we're a nation of gardeners, tidiers, keepers. Can we bring ourselves to cope with something unkept? To abandon the idea that the landscape needs us to survive? The royal hunting forest rewilded itself, too far from the court. Moorland became meadow, became scrub. Ruin and rupture all grown over by the swaddling green, the venison and the vert. Perhaps it's time for a new reclamation of our upland wastes. And we're all archipelagos, really. The empty moor, a Victorian invention. Profit and prestige capitalising on aristocratic decline. And so the landscape is itself a picture, a stilled point in time, a refuge of living history, drawn on the wealth of elsewhere, arbitrary borders inked in isolated beauty. And this exclusion has a latency. Lines etched across generations are unevenly felt. The pandemic brought new people here, adventures close to home. Farmers saw their gates left open, litter dropped, fires lit, livestock worried. Everything squeezed, the background unease, unspoken codes of how to behave. The loneliness of an island ebbing on the tides of faraway war. The hours are endless and the tenance is short. the make, do and mend, each farmyard an archaeology of deep time and recent past. Farmers were the original land activists here, each family chipping out a space on the fell to call home. Inheritances now evaporating in ties and tenure. And there's a disconnect from decision making, the clamour of voices from elsewhere, knowledge hard won from working this land, the millstones and grit. But how do you ever learn if you're not asked? We have it in ourselves to become more open. Are you lost? No, you're welcome.
So here we are, one little love, and leading love in the noble world. We sense the love and all our love on your beloved.
Pendle. Hills, hills, hills. We all need space to dream. All this was fields just a few generations ago, heydays of drove roads and dance halls, now awaiting the next unearthing. The sadness of a place still. Beneath the bracken, a ghost forest, under the ripple, a village. Somewhere, seen at a distance, the enclosure, a shadow on the fell. Bowland has never been a blank space. People have moved across it forever, plants and animals thriving before the guide of human hands. The ridge and furrow, the tenter fields, the pollen beneath the plough. Something is always seeding in the cracks, under the skin. You can hear it whispered in the quiet places. This is where my ashes will be scattered. This is where I proposed. Here is where I found out what I really wanted. Here is where my world closed. And you can read this place's past through its form. A bow in the land, a curve in the wall, the salt path, the coffin road, beneath the peat, beyond the fell wall, the seed bank mnemonic, the wood for the forest, the expanse of the chase, the corncrake, the wildcat, the lynx. How do we decide what has value here? Will we speak of the salmon, the hen harrier, or the peregrine in the same breath? And what are the landscape's rights itself to keep dark skies and dead spots when the unbroken line is really dashes and dots? The border between memory and imagination is thin. There's a shimmer behind the shroud, a glimpse of something more, the glint of sunlight on spate, the spark of quartz in the peat, the hillside smoke curling through the heather, shards of light through the clag. That hot summer, a few decades past, with wildfires on the fells, the clouds burst and the valleys were full, houses snapped in two, all of us inundated under the same watershed, a glimmer of a distant past turned emergency future, because everything has a return period. The rubble of glacial river made young again, the tunnel under the drowned streets. There's resilience in restoration, both for ourselves and this place. The healthy bog holds the water, damps the flame. This spring it has hardly rained at all. The bogs don't stop, they shatter, the sphagnum bleached and tattered. Time layers and loops. Access is imagination. This is a place formed in memory. Can we allow it to dream? The shimmer comes from the things beyond our ken, the kin made over and again. So lend your voice to the understory, put your ear to the earth and listen to everything that it's possible to hear. All our bodies of water springing from this place, the bluebells and the mycelium, the fellfoot song. Listen.
If I was a mole in the ground, if I was a mole in the ground, if I was a mole, I'd put that mountain down. If I was a mole in the ground, if I was a lizard in the spring, If I was a lizard in the spring.
Everything happens for a season, you know, always in relation, in flow. Access fosters accountability, you hope. Remote sensing becomes ground truthing. Attention leads to care, leads to responsibility. We were all new here once. Inequality orbits from its richest core, but borders are always open to being reworked. Diversity speaks to people and ecology both. Together, they erupt in kinship between worlds, find new ways to belong. The gap between seen and unseen, the world refracted through a screen. What would it take for you to find a home in the hills? And words matter. Access, community and restoration all shift depending on who is defining them. A wood mote of truth, a speck of something caught on the breeze. There is meaning in shared stories, the contours of a life. We're not so different, we all live under the same weather system. So walk the flesh transparent, we are diffuse. Change happens at the pace of trust, and trust is always reciprocal. Responsibility comes from the ability to respond, to take time, to adjust, to be a sound mirror. Accountability works in all ways. Draw a line under this. Think of it as a pocket, the space to imagine how it might be other, to foster hope, to inspire rupture. Pockets join up, they ripple out across a place, past the forever chemical spills, the below of the burned peat, the cracked trackers and scattered nests. These invisible traces of a place have latent power. The dye seeps a lag tide. How would we act differently if we could see the world through the eyes of another? Access is transparency. So let's expand our frame for flourishing. Build a field to fit us all. A bow in the land, the curve of the fell horizon. There is always time to change course. So echolocate, with arms that reach and radiate. This place could be a sponge without losing its shape. Its value would ripple out into the world and back. We have it within ourselves to become more porous.
So there we go, that was the installation film that essentially the words, films, sounds, ideas of 2,000 people made. Pretty much all the words that you heard were things that were said to me or recorded or some otherwise documented, and then I kind of tried to piece it all together into a narrative along with the sound and the film. So here's three to kind of finish up today for the next kind of 10 minutes or so. Here's three big questions I'm thinking about in doing projects like this. The first question is about partnership. In projects like this, I'm often working, maybe this is something to think about in your own careers, I'm often working with non-arts organisations. I'm going to talk about it in a minute, that obviously there's arts organisations like the Arts Council who might commission you, who might give you cash to make some work. But what I'm finding increasingly is that I'm working in situations as an artist commissioned by non-arts organisations. Often these are people doing socially engaged projects, or increasingly they're environmental organisations. Again, it's a sort of a guide for you guys. There are pots of cash there. Often these organisations like having an artist in their midst to kind of make them think about things in new ways, to ask new questions, to see things differently. It's an avenue to explore if you're interested. But when you're in it, there's kind of this sense of, well, actually, what am I as an artist? If like one morning I feel like a therapist, another morning I feel like a social worker, the next day I'm talking to policymakers, you can feel like you sort of have to shapeshift. You sort of have to have that real sense of like, right, what's that identity of what I'm doing and why? Second thing I'm thinking about a lot is practice. How when I'm making this work, and we've talked about it already, I can make work that is really attentive to the people that I'm working with and the places that I'm working with. But not only that, kind of my needs as an artist. Again, it's easy to get lost in what other people want from you in these sort of situations. It's important to keep hold of what is it actually I do as an artist and what do I want to make? What's the thing that makes me excited? What's the creative flame inside me that I want to keep burning? And the third big question that I'm asking myself at the moment is about production. This was an installation I did on an abandoned military island in Finland called Oro. And I'm thinking about all these networks of value and impact of what other people want from me as an artist. But actually, how can I navigate all of this to keep this thing going, to be able to keep making a living out of it, whilst also making work that somehow matters, that somehow says something about a place, or about politics, or about people, that maybe helps people think about things in a productive or a progressive or a new or a helpful sort of way. So those are the three big questions that are kind of going around my head at the moment. I'd be interested in any of you have a perspective on them afterwards, but about partnership, about practice, and about production. And I want to finish with 5 things that if I was starting again, that I'd maybe think about. And I guess before I go into this, it was interesting talking to Paul before this lecture, because I'm the oldest of 3 kids, right? All of us grew up on the edge of Burnley, kind of single mum, not a lot of money kicking about, doesn't matter, but whatever. All 3 of us have ended up now as freelance artists one way or another. We're still making a do of it. My little brother, who wildly came here and Paul taught 20 years ago, is now a filmmaker working in Manchester. My little sister Katie is an artist, has a studio at the Haworth in Accrington. And the thing that unites all 3 of us is just an absolute stubbornness not to stop, to make a way, to find a way of doing it, of finding other jobs, of finding teaching, of finding kind of workshops and facilitating, to always make sure that we can keep making art. And if you take one thing away from this, it's that if you want to do it, you can do it. Not going to be easy, you're not going to be rich, but you can do it, right? So if I was starting again, there's 5 things I'd think about. So the first one is it's almost like, to use horrible business language, it's like your USP, unique selling point. Like, what's special about the way you see the world, your experiences, your way of understanding the people and places around you? What the kind of experiences and the stories that you can tell from that, because each one of you has that story and that life and that memory to share with the world, and each one of you has that thing that's valuable and vital. And it's just thinking about, how do I do that within the kind of creative practices that I'm interested in? So yeah, where we live in East Lancashire is a special place, right? It's full of like all these interesting stories. I'm really, in my work, I often like to talk about it as like telling small stories about people or a place that can speak to big issues, right? The small can really speak to the universal and global. So it's thinking about what's special about you, what's special about your way you sort of see the world. Second thing is, even when you're thinking about what's special about you, is about thinking about what's special about the people around you. I think doing these things together in community and in collaboration is so often the kind of basis of being able to sustain yourself as an artist and sustain your kind of like well-being and your health and your mental health. Like, it's absolutely vital to find like-minded people who are all working towards kind of same goals as you. And in East Lancashire, we're really lucky with our kind of like cultural ecosystem, really. There's Drift, part of Super Slowway that both Paul and I have been involved in. There's so many organisations like this, Festival of Making. They have lots of kind of opportunities for volunteering, for running workshops, paid, for doing residencies. It's kind of finding your people, essentially, and knowing a lot of these people who are organising these like groups and communities. They're always on the lookout for like fresh voices and fresh people who can kind of tell stories about the place that we all live in. So don't be afraid to kind of get involved and show what you can do in situ in kind of Burnley and Nelson. That again I work with, Paul works with a lot of these similar ideas we've been talking about throughout, kind of as organising principles. This is Jewellers in Lancaster, near where I live now, a free alternative art school where people are just getting together to kind of in abandoned shops, in things like that, to kind of do this kind of free community-led artwork together. And if it doesn't exist already, make it happen. It's that sense of like be that change that you want to see. And whilst you're doing all this, know where to look for other people giving you money. When you want to make this stuff happen, the Arts Council is the kind of traditional way to like make your ideas a reality. We're in a sort of difficult stage right now. The Arts Council's in a bit of a transitional phase where things like developing your creative practice, which historically has been a really good way for like young and early career artists to get a bit of cash to work with a mentor. That's been paused, but it might come back. And then there's National Lottery project grants where you can get between £1,000 and £100 to make a project you want to make happen. AN is a brilliant network to be involved in. Again, I mean, I love this. If it doesn't exist, build it. It's kind of the vibe of the whole talk, really. But AN's a really good resource for getting kind of opportunities, residencies, kind of things like this to join. Starving Artist Network is absolutely brilliant. I'd absolutely recommend. They've got a really good Instagram as well that kind of pops up with new opportunities every week for you. And it's just seeing things, and the spirit, I would say, is just, if you feel like you've got the space and the time to apply for stuff, just have a go. It's like buying a ticket. You don't kind of win if you don't buy the ticket, you don't get the thing. So just keep trying. And the thing about writing applications, arts applications, is they're not always easy to do, but there's a lot of resources and help out there for you to do it. This is a website called White Pube, amazing name, but they have this incredible successful funding application library where people just share Arts Council, whatever else applications have been successful, so you can read how people have written things to be able to get money. Really recommend having a look at all that. In the middle of all this, I'm sort of trying to like really advocate for saying there's ways to sustain your life, by making money through your art, and there are channels where you can get funding. When you start as an artist, often you'll be asked to do things for free or no money, and I guess many of you will already have experienced that. There's a bit of a chronic undervaluation of artists often, and a lot of big institutions are broke as well. And what I'd say to that is pick and choose very, very carefully what you decide to do for free at the start of your career. People will often talk about this in terms of exposure for your work. And that can be true if you get a foot in the door with the right sort of organisations, but always have this in the back of your mind that you can die of exposure, right? You've got to find that balance, especially early on, between sharing your work with the world and making sure that kind of financially you can make a do of it. And it is possible, but make sure you don't get taken for a ride. And as part of that, it's always knowing your worth, right? Join the union. This is Artists Union England. They have really clear guidelines on how much you should be getting paid as an artist. So as a new graduate, they recommend asking for 216 quid a day, or 27 quid an hour. And this gives you, like, when you go to work with organisations, this gives you just a real clear, there's no emotion or anything in it. It's just saying, well, actually, that's what the union recommends, that's what I'm going to ask for. It might be a starting point for negotiation, but it sort of gives you like a very transparent way of saying, this is what I think I'm worth. There's all sorts of like resources that you can find on gov.uk about how to kind of do contracts, about how to do invoices when you want to get paid. I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to go into much depth with that. Also, crucially, this is a bit of a cheat code in making a do of it as a freelancer. if you don't get paid on time or quickly enough, there's this Late Payment of Commercial Debt Act of 1988, in which you can say to organisations, if you don't pay you quickly in 30 days, whatever you decide, you can charge them interest, you can charge them a penalty fee. I've only ever had to do it twice in my entire career, but it's a good thing to have in the back of your mind. People aren't paying you on time. And fifth, just to finish, just to reiterate this whole thing, just keep going, just keep at it. Whatever you're doing as an artist, there'll be a way, there'll be a niche for you to make money from it to keep your life going. Whether that's kind of, like added to from teaching, from writing, from facilitating, from being a consultant, as well as being the thing that you do as an artist. If you just keep going, you'll make a do of it. And I'm going to leave you with that.
So, please just give your thanks to Rob again. We'll see you now in 15 minutes if you want to join us. Thanks very much. See you later. Nice one.